Welcome to the workshop. We are back today with another high quality watch from Aliexpress. Instead of a new release, I've chosen to take a close look at this Reef Tiger Imperator. And that's running a 90-15 movement and also sports this very complex silver dial. It is an overlooked model from a brand that's definitely lost the limelight, and I think that makes it perfect for this channel. So remember guys, if you like forgotten watches, then please like and subscribe. It's my #1 motivator for filming new reviews. Reef Tiger is actually a very early Chinese high-end brand, but it has definitely lost significant market share to the likes of San Martin and Chronos, and I think that's part of the reason why this model never really gained traction. But that being said, if you're looking for a classic 40mm dress/business casual watch, this has a ton to offer. The 90-15 movement is the real star here. But that's backed up by some really interesting branding and design on the dial. This is by no means an homage, but there are a couple Tudor touches, and we'll talk a bit about that later. But first, let's look at some competitors. For reference, we have the 90-15 on the left, and on the right is the Swiss-made evolution of that movement from La Joux. And they can get away with that because both companies are under the Citizen Mayotta group, and it's a well-respected movement. It's actually one of my favorites, but the only downside is it has a slightly loud unidirectional rotor. And it's too bad that we don't see this movement in too many Aliexpress watches these days. It's become more relegated to the more expensive micro brands, but I'm sure you remember this Cadison Diamond. And it's one of the earliest, as well as still the cheapest, 90-15 based watches on Aliexpress. But unfortunately, very few buyers appreciate this extra bling on the dial. Bernie recently launched a very simple design, and it may have served, except you'll notice it's sapphire-coated mineral crystal. And I just love my high-end movements with crystals that really just aren't going to last, right? Don't you? Moving on, the Reef Tiger, even though it dates back to 2015, I only saw it with these horrible two-tone plus the bracelet examples. So we can be a bit more grown up, a bit more classic, a bit more modern. So we do the silver on a leather strap that lets us save some money too. And actually in the last summer sale, this came down to $155 US. I had to show you this on wrist, even though it's obviously a bit too large for my arm. 40mm is the sweet spot for a lot of folks and even a minimum for a lot of guys. For dimensions, we have a 41mm case, and that is a 48.5mm lug-to-lug length, so definitely on the larger size. But if we look at the thickness here, it's actually kept at 10.5mm, and that's thanks to that slim 90-15 movement. Unfortunately, these are 21mm strap-sized lugs, and I even think if we put it in there, you'll see they've supplied it with a 20mm strap. So it's a bit like an Orient Bambino. You'll be a little hard-pressed to find the best straps. It does match nicely, and it does come down to a regular 18mm at the clasp. The clasp itself is a double deployant with some decent perlage finishing here on the interior. It also has a nice laser engraved logo on the outside. It really is too bad that this is a 20mm strap on 21mm lugs, because it's actually quite a nice strap. The stitching is top notch. The leather is quite nice and supple. You can see it's calf skin and also signed. But the problem is, so I think really what you're going to end up doing is you'll take this off and put it on another watch and then find just a nice 21mm strap for this guy. So there's that unidirectional rotor in action. At the back here, we have a display case back that is mineral crystal and the gorgeous 90-15 movement. So my top 3 favorite features there have to be the line, the stripe finishing, as well as that big fat center pivot. And of course, you can see that this outer bit to the rotor here is kind of sparkly, and that's because it's bimetallic. You can even see where it's pinned there. So just kind of cool. Also nice to see that the movement ring on the inside, which is a spot that a lot of brands cut corners and make plastic, is actually metal here. So other than that, I mean, we've got the engravings on the back, and the Swiss tech is a bit cringe. I mean, outside of that La Joux connection, but otherwise, this is just all standard model information. Water resistance claims are pretty conservative at 50 meters, and that's given that this has both a screw down case back and crown, and it has an interesting crown profile, which is kind of this reverse cupcake, I like to think of it. The case profile is also a lot different just in terms of how slab-sided it is, a bit like a modern Tudor. And it works here just because the movement is so thin, as well as we have some very fine horizontal brushing on the sides. And then the top of the case is polished, which is why I think this is more of like a business casual watch. We also get an interesting two-part bezel that is actually a leftover quirk of the two-tone version. So one of these would have been gold electroplated. But what I really like is the transition between brushed surfaces that also just, you know, it fades down nicely to the silver on the dial. And this is a flat sapphire crystal, has decent anti-reflective properties already. Dial sort of speaks for itself. Indices are both brushed and polished. The fluted ring ties them in with the frame date window as well. And technically it's a sector dial because we have an interior seconds track, the hours, and then the outer Arabic minutes ring. The hands have clearly been designed for the watch, and while the second hand has not been heat blued, all of them have a really nice mix of contrasting surfaces and colors. The smiley face self-winding text is another throwback to Tudor, and a quick history lesson. Imperator was an honorific for a battlefield award in the Roman Republic and later used by Western emperors, including Napoleon, and that's who this watch is intended to tribute. That's Aurelia Harbor on Lake Simcoe. I am up in cottage country for yet another buddy's wedding, but can't complain about the view. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this review, and it's funny how we had to go back over half a decade just to find something that's a little different than the current Chinese design language. Anyways, thanks again, and I will see you again next time. The water resistance claims are quite conservative at 50 mil. Water